Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Over the last couple videos, I've taken a look back at the best and the worst that the previous generation had to offer. But this week, I don't know about all you, but I kind of want to look forward to something. So I took a look at every single game slated to come out in 2021, and I've narrowed it down to the 10 games that I think are going to be the biggest games of the year. And I took that and put it into a YouTube-friendly numbered list in no particular order. So if you end up not hating this video, go down below, give it a like, share it with a friend, or better yet, subscribe to the channel. Your support really does mean a lot to me. The first game that I've chosen is Hollow Knight Silksong. If you've seen my video about what I think to be the best games of the previous generation, then you know exactly how much I loved the first Hollow Knight game. So the idea of getting literally any more of that is just infinitely exciting to me. And getting to play as Hornet means that it's going to be probably not completely different, but different enough in terms of fighting and traversal that it'll feel entirely fresh again. And I'm really hoping that they can capture that feeling of something new and wonderful again. But even if it's just more Hollow Knight, I'm good with that. Meeting new bugs, exploring new locations, fighting new bosses, that's honestly enough for me. Number 2 is Halo Infinite. We were all really bummed when Halo got delayed out of the launch window of the new Xbox consoles. But based on the way that it looked when they showed it off, and just this whole shitstorm surrounding Cyberpunk right now, I think we can all agree that delaying it was probably the right call. Because yes, not having it at launch is something that has hurt the launch of that system. Having it be a bad Halo game, another bad Halo game, because 4 and 5 were, I mean, I didn't hate them, but they weren't what they used to be. But having another bad Halo game would just be so much more damaging than not having that game at launch has been. Whereas if they can take this year and make that game what we all want it to be and put it out in 2021, I think that it's infinitely more valuable to them, especially when you consider that 2021 is the 20-year anniversary of Halo as a property. The first game came out in 2001. So I think that Microsoft is probably going to lean into Halo as an IP just for the entire year. I bet we hear more about that TV show that maybe will even launch this year. That'd be cool. Maybe some smaller Halo projects. I don't know what they would be. But if they can put out another Halo game that is on the same level of like a Reach or an ODST, then I think that this will very easily be one of the better games of this year. Number 3 is Breath of the Wild 2. A lot of the lists that I've been looking at had Breath of the Wild 2 on there, but I couldn't figure out whether or not it was ever confirmed by Nintendo to be coming out this year. But that being said, it really should come out this year because they have to put out something. And the only other games that we've heard about from them, I think, are Metroid Prime 4 and Bayonetta 3. And while I'm sure both of those games would perform very well, neither of them have a chance of hitting as hard as a Breath of the Wild 2. The first Breath of the Wild was such a good step in the right direction for Nintendo, because my problem with Nintendo, and I'm sure a lot of other people's, is that they always feel like technologically they're so far behind. But Breath of the Wild was a really good step to correct that. Like having it be in an open world, having like ambient quests, and just making it feel like a proper AAA game. I don't think it went all the way there. Like it's definitely not on the same level as like a Witcher 3 or a Dragon Age or something like that. But if they make another equally large step, I think that Breath of the Wild 2 could really be the trendsetter that people were saying the first one was. Number 4 is Resident Evil Village, or Resident Evil 8, however you want to say it. A new Resident Evil game is always going to be exciting and is always going to be noteworthy. But this one, for me, I think is especially exciting because while I really love the Resident Evil 2 and 3 remakes, that third-person style, and I think that that's probably the direction that they're going to go in future, I really loved the first-person just tension that you get in Resident Evil 7, and in this game they're continuing that. It's even the same character, and on top of that they're leaning into more fantastical elements. You know, it looks like there's going to be like werewolves and witches, and Chris is in it, and also maybe the bad guy, and maybe a werewolf based on the promotional art. So there's just a lot of interesting things going on about this game, and I'm really excited to see what it ends up being like. Number 5 is Horizon Forbidden West. The first Horizon was, I think, probably the first big PS4 game that sort of started them on the trend of really highly critically acclaimed games. I didn't personally like the first Horizon. I thought that a lot of the characters were really irritating, especially Aloy, and I was not a fan of how it felt like all of the most interesting things in the story happened at literally thousands of years before the start of the game. But regardless of that, this is very clearly going to be one of the biggest games of the year. It has that like trifecta of things that game critics love. You know, it looks really good. The main character doesn't look like me. And there's something about it that they can point to and say that's different. In this case, robot animals, which is admittedly pretty cool. But I guess that's kind of toned down just by nature of this being a sequel. So they've replaced that with the game taking place in San Francisco, where almost every major video game reviewing thing is. IGN, Polygon, Kind of Funny, like all them dudes are in San Francisco. So expect in reviews to hear like, oh, I rode that weird robot deer across the Golden Gate Bridge and it reminded me of my commute to work every day. Like, expect that to be the new Feels Like the Spider-Man. I'm calling my shot now. But I think this game is going to be pretty good, and it's definitely going to be one of the best reviewed games of the year. And while we're on the topic of really popular video games that I didn't personally like, number 6 is God of War Ragnarok. I know that I am probably one of the only people on the planet that didn't like the first one of these games, and honestly, that could be a whole video in and of itself. But regardless of whether or not I liked it, this hands down will be one of the biggest games of whatever year it comes out. That being said, I'm not wholly confident that it's actually going to come out in 2021. The fact that we have seen nothing about it except a title card is a little disheartening. Like, I usually have a trailer going when I'm talking about games, and I honestly don't know what I'm going to use for this section, so, I mean, you can see it now, but I literally have no idea. And when you consider that the first game came out in 2018, which is only 3 years ago, I just worry that they haven't had enough time to make a second game that will be as good as everyone on the planet except me thought that the first one was. Especially when you consider that probably by the time it comes out, more than a year of those 3 years will have been spent in work from home pandemic situations. I fully expect it to be delayed. But if it does come out, it'll be huge. And if you can't wait for it to come out, that you could probably just read a Wikipedia page about what happens during Ragnarok, and just every couple sentences insert the sentence and then Kratos grunts, and you'll have like 60% of the story right there. Number 7 is Far Cry 6. I don't have a whole lot of love for the Far Cry series. I thought that 3 and 5 were good enough, but 2, 4, Primal, and I think the other one was New Dawn or First Dawn or something. All of those just were better off not being played, in my opinion. But this is definitely going to be Ubisoft's biggest game of the year, unless they pull another Assassin's Creed entirely out of their ass, which I wouldn't expect. But these games always perform really well, and they're decently fun. I think that this one, for me personally, has more of a chance of being interesting, just because the main villain is Giancarlo Esposito, who I love, and you probably know him from The Mandalorian or Breaking Bad. He's a really great actor. And the fact that we know that there's going to be like a city instead of just being on a tropical or otherwise more or less abandoned island, just to me feels like it'll be a little bit more fresh and interesting, which is definitely a good thing for a series that's been going on as long as Far Cry has. Number 8 is Back 4 Blood. If you haven't heard about this, it's just Left 4 Dead 3 except legally distinct, because Valve is, I guess, just super terrified of the number 3. Have they ever put out a third game in a series? I don't know for sure. I'm gonna say no. But I'm really excited for this game. There's a little bit of weirdness where it's like some of these designs are very clearly just the special infected from Left 4 Dead, but different. Like there's one called the Ogre, who's very clearly just the tank, but taller. There's one called the Wretch, who's basically just like the Spitter and the Boomer stuck together. But given the circumstances, I think that that's probably to be expected and fine. Like, I'll let them get away with it. Because if you were playing games in the 360 generation, you played Left 4 Dead, and you probably have a funny story about that time you and your friends did whatever. I mean, like, even my mom had a good time playing Left 4 Dead, and I think she's played like 3 video games ever, but she still talks about that time she killed a hunter in Left 4 Dead. So that's really exciting. Maybe when this comes out, I'll make her play it. She'll probably hate it, but it'll be good. Number 9 is Gotham Knights. It looks like it's basically just another Arkham game, which is exciting enough by itself, because I love all of the Arkham games, even Origins, which I think is pretty clearly the weakest of the 4. Like, even that one is fun, and I think that this one, even at its worst day, will be as good as Origins. That being said, I do think it's a little weird that this one doesn't take place in the same like universe as the Arkham games, because without spoiling the end of Arkham Knight, this game seems like it's going to start in a place very similar to where Arkham Knight ends, and a lot of the character designs look almost exactly the same. Like, especially Mr. Freeze, like the goggles and the helmet armor thing is like very clearly the same. And the Suicide Squad game, that is in the same universe as the Arkham games, despite it taking place in a different city with a Harley Quinn who's very clearly different than the Harley Quinn we know from those games. And also it's post-apocalyptic after Brainiac like destroyed the world or some shit. Like, weird choices as far as that's concerned. But I think that Gotham Knights is gonna be really fun. It's co-op focus, which I probably won't play it in co-op, so hopefully it's still fun enough single player. But I trust this studio to make a good game, and I'm very much looking forward to this game. Number 10 is Hogwarts Legacy. And let's get this out of the way right off the bat. J.K. Rowling is a dumbass, and she should be banned from Twitter, just like some other recent people. And I totally understand if, because of a lot of the stupid shit that she said, if you don't want to play this game or you're not excited for it at all, I for sure won't hold that against you. I don't think anybody would. And I hope you won't hold it against me that I still very much am excited for this game. Because who hasn't at some point in time wanted to explore Hogwarts? Like, the idea of having a expansive RPG where I can go around and figure out the secrets of Hogwarts, or like go to Hogsmeade or Diagon Alley, or just meet new friends, or even just going to magic classes sounds like so much fun. Like, there's very little about this game that doesn't excite me. The studio that made it, I don't know them super well, but they have made good games in the past, and I hope that this will be even better than those ones. But I personally have very high hopes for this game, and it's probably, on this whole list, the game that I am most interested in seeing how it turns out. So those are, to me, the biggest games coming out in 2021, but there are so many other hopefully great games coming out this year, but I just couldn't cover them here. The video would be so ridiculously long. But please let me know what you're most excited for this year in the comments below. Doesn't even have to be a game. I'm just interested in hearing what good things could come out of this year. But you all know the drill. Like, share, subscribe, and until next time, I'll see you around.